so we're gonna do a mixed media flower, which I shared. So I'm just gonna show you guys this because this is actually a print that I embellished, but this will give you an idea of kind of like the finished product of it. So, I mean, I don't know if anyone knows what my paintings look like, you'll know that I use these all the time. So this one is made out of like fabric and some gold foil. So this is what we're gonna be working on, but of course we're not gonna do the whole portrait. We're just doing a flower. I was gonna do a mixed media portrait, and then I realized that was not even remotely possible in a half hour. So, all right, so we're gonna start. I have this tiny little artboard. You can work on anything that has like a, like a hefty kind of a surface. I do recommend having something on your surface just to make it more interesting. So I'm gonna I have a bunch of stuff that I collected here. This is like a wine bag from a grocery store with kind of a cool pattern on it. But I use anything for my for mixed media. So it's really, in my opinion, much more fun to just find stuff than to like go get it at an art store. So it just feels more exciting that way. So here we go. Here's a trash bag. Yeah, and feel free to ask questions. So the first thing I'm going to do is put a whole background on this. Okay, so this is the glue that I'm using. It's Golden brand, but you can use anything like, well, not anything, probably like Mod Podge or any kind of a medium. It doesn't, obviously the finish doesn't matter for these purposes. I'm sorry, someone just decided to start leaf blowing. I hope you don't hear it.
I can't hear it, so.
Good. So we're just gonna cover the whole surface. Is this a pretty good view? Can you guys see? Let me.
That's a little better. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, because you don't need to see me. All right. We're gonna cover the whole surface pretty liberally. This is quite small for me, so I'm gonna fumble a little bit. But I thought we could do it small because if someone wants to actually have this like to hang up or something, it would be kind of a neat thing to have that. It'll work better as far as composition to have a smaller piece because we're only gonna do a small flower, if that makes sense. Okay, and then we're gonna cover the whole surface, or most of it. I like leaving kind of little spots like this to make it a little bit more interesting. And we can trim it up later. It's gonna have tons of bubbles. You can spray it with some water and just flatten it out. But I like a little bit of texture, so I don't mind that it's gonna be gonna have some wrinkles in it. And then you can trim it once it's dry. If you try to trim it once it's wet, you'll rip it. So it looks kind of messy until the end, and at the end you can trim it up. So I hope that makes sense to everybody so far. Okay, and then I picked a bunch of different fabrics and papers. This is some wrapping paper. This is some old sheet music that I actually found on the street. Somebody threw out like a stack this big of this really cool old sheet music. And it's signed by the person and everything. I thought it was really awesome. It smells like cigarette smoke though. And then this paper, I have a piece of fabric, piece of a newspaper or magazine, and then a little piece of the New Yorker here. So I did take some time to see if they were gonna, you know, kind of be a little bit cohesive. If they're not, that's okay, because you can paint over the pieces, which I do all the time. If it doesn't work, you just paint over it. So, you know, that's kind of the great thing about painting. So what I'm really looking for more is like pattern and texture, and a little bit of color too. So you're gonna take like 3 of the pieces that you picked. So I'm gonna do this piece of paper, this fabric, and maybe this wrapping paper. And you're gonna put it together. So you're gonna stack them up like this, okay? And then just take any pencil and you just make a really basic petal shape. It's not a good marker. So I'm gonna make it about this size. And I'm gonna make a really basic rounded petal shape. So we're gonna do a really basic flower shape, like a daisy or something. I mean, if you want, you can have it a little pointed like this, or, you know, that's totally up to you. Okay, and then we're gonna cut that out with holding on to the stack so that we have a uniform shape. Actually, I think I'm gonna do a little pointed. Okay, so then you have 3 petals, and we're gonna wanna continue that process until you have about like 9 or so. So I'm gonna take the other piece of paper. I'm gonna go back with the fabric again. Like, you know, just for aesthetic purposes, you'll wanna repeat, or maybe not, but in my, you know, in my opinion, I think it looks good to repeat some of the patterns. So I'll have like this little plaid fabric and this print that I'll use a couple of times. And then a piece of the sheet music. And, you know, you can stack as many as works for your scissors, right? Like I'm not gonna do more than 3 because then it starts to get difficult to cut. So then take one of your other petals that you just cut out. Okay, just to use it as a template so that you have the same size, and you're gonna trace that. I'm sort of working on my lap here. This is not how I usually work, but there's a tripod in the middle of my working space, so. Which is not usually there, obviously. All right, and then I'm gonna cut it again. So then we're gonna have 6 petals, and then we're gonna do it one more time. And they don't have to be perfect at all. I don't, you know, I don't do anything so that it's perfect. And you can always adjust things if you don't like it. So then, you know, and you can use either side of this sheet music, which I think is pretty cool. All right, so I'm gonna do it one more time. I'm gonna use this striped paper. Once again, I'm gonna use this fabric and probably the sheet music. Oh, and I want to show you one thing here. I always find cards on the side of the road. I absolutely love when I find them. And one way you can use them, I'm not going to use this right now because it just doesn't really go with my color scheme. But I like to just soak them in water for a little while, and then you can take it and then it splits. So now I have this back of the card, and then somewhere in this water will be the other half. See? So then, anyway, I think they're really cool to use in collages. I use them a lot in flowers and faces and all kinds of stuff. And if you find them, then that's even extra lucky. All right, so I'm gonna do my last bit of petals. Again, I'm going to take one of the ones I already cut to use as a template, so it's more or less the same size. Trace it. So the only, I just want to say the only material I wouldn't use is like a stretchy cotton. It's just really difficult to work with, and it's just not very nice to work with. You get all kinds of bubbles and all kinds of technical issues. Okay, so now I have enough. This is like dry enough that I can work on it as a surface. And then I have all my petals here. So I'm going to move the camera just to show you guys. I'm working on my lap right now, but can you see that? So what I'll do is I'll take all my petals and I'll arrange them. You know, you want to arrange it before you do any gluing. So sometimes if I'm working on a canvas, I'll tape everything up before I commit to any kind of glue. Can everyone see this?
Yeah, looks great.
Okay. So I'm just kind of arranging it to see how I like it. I do like this color combination. I think it looks pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and start putting it on there. You know, at this point, obviously, if you're making this as sort of a piece on its own, you'll want to consider composition. I'm not really doing that right now. I'm just kind of putting it on there to show you guys how to do it. If I were making this into its own piece, I probably wouldn't have it dead center like this. I would maybe put it over to like the top right and then trim it. I think that would look pretty cool. So if anyone's doing this as its own art project, I think it looks much better to have it off center. Again, that's just my opinion. And then you can trim it at the end when it's dry. And I think it would look pretty cool. But for the purposes of this tutorial, I'm going to have it dead center. Okay. So then we're just going to start gluing it on there. You know, you can have it, you know, keep it arranged in a way that you like so that you'll know, you know, how to put it on there. I like this sort of text here. So we're gonna, instead of putting glue on the petals, we'll put it on the surface. So, you know, this dries clear, so you don't have to worry about making it perfect. So we're just gonna do our first petal. And I mean, depending on what kind of glue you're using, like you can move this around, you know, for a few minutes before it starts to completely dry. After that, it gets kind of difficult, and you know, that also depends on what material you're using. So you want to just keep going. You'll go right over the first petal. You can see that one's not perfect, doesn't bother me at all. And I do tend to paint over it. I am using a semi-gloss finish, which I think, you know, I think it's the best for just kind of not really impacting the material you're using very much. The matte kind of flattens it out, obviously, and then the high gloss gives it a shine, which I don't really like. So I'm using semi-gloss, which seems like a kind of perfect. So I'm just, you know, as you can see, I'm just kind of creating this sort of arch, and I'm going to keep going all the way around. And, you know, there's obviously, this is just like a really kind of basic flower shape. You can, you know, look at a flower book or an actual flower and do any shape you want. Or it doesn't have to be a flower at all. You can apply these principles to anything. And I mean, it's really fun to try, like once you kind of get your mind working in a way that you're looking for materials, you find them everywhere. You know, like when I walk my dog, I'm constantly looking at stuff on the street. Not so much anymore because I don't touch anything anymore, but you know, back in the day. I once found 3 ripped up $20 bills, which was like my best trash day of all time. I still think about it. Does anyone have any questions so far? I wouldn't know if you do, I don't know.
Feel free to unmute yourself if you have any questions at any point.
Thank you. So this feels a little big, so I'm just gonna cut it. I'm just gonna trim it a little bit.
Juliette,
Yes, hello.
would you say that fabrics, cotton-based, would be better than any other material?
As long as it's not like super stretchy, you know, you'll find out when you try to glue things on, like what's gonna work. And you know, I'm not a fabrics expert, but there's certain fabric that just doesn't work. It just doesn't glue well. You know, no matter what kind of glue you put on it, it looks terrible. Like it's really, and it tends to be like stretchier type fabrics. So like you're pretty safe with, yeah, I guess most. Like lace is good, like most cottons, as long as they're not the really really stretchy kind. Like t-shirt material doesn't work, and from my experience, all that well. So that's the only one I kind of stay away from.
Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. Like this one is like quilting squares. I buy like quilting scraps from people on eBay once in a while, so those work really well. I mean, I love this sheet music because it has awesome words on it, like old love, like all these cool old lyrics from the, you know, I think this music sheets were from the 40s. And it smells like your grandma's basement, which is pretty awesome. We might have to do a couple more petals, it looks like. Maybe just one more. I'm going to do one more petal. And then we'll be done with the main part of it. Well, I think I'll do the sheet music. That's about the right size. And then we'll do the center. Okay, so I think that looks pretty good for a start. If anyone has any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, we're gonna work on, we're gonna do the center part. I think it's called a pistil, the round part of the flower. Just looked that up. And we'll just kind of see what works. I just kind of put things up there. I kind of like this, actually. This piece of the Jack of Diamonds. So I'm just gonna cut, I'm gonna cut a circle out of here. I don't need it to be perfect at all.
Could we use a button here, or would
Oh,
you?
absolutely, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, actually, I'll probably end up putting something over this. So you can definitely layer. I guess the only thing I should say is for the center, you want something that has a little bit of body to it because you're gonna have all this other stuff underneath. So you don't want anything too flimsy because then all this other stuff is gonna kind of make it difficult to glue it on there.
Juliette, could you say
Yeah.
again what kind of glue you're using?
Yeah, I use Golden brand like everything, honestly, but this is regular gel gloss. So, you know, Golden has like heavy gel, it has regular gel, and it comes in all different kinds of finishes. I like, you know, for just basic kind of stuff like this where I'm not gluing on anything crazy, this works great. Sometimes I use soft and sometimes I use heavy stuff. So yeah, this is a heavy gel. If I'm doing like, if I'm collaging anything pretty heavy duty, I would use this. But for paper, this works great. And it dries pretty quickly, and it, the finish when it dries is really nice. So from here, I have this little, I don't know, this little piece of fabric that I think was a drawstring for a pair of pants. And I'm gonna put that around the center part of the flower. So I'm gonna use quite a bit of paint here. I mean, sorry, glue. And you can wet this, like it makes it kind of easier to work with. So I'm gonna kind of dunk it in the water and then measure it. And just measure with my finger here where I'm gonna cut it. And just kind of shape that. Add a little bit more glue. You probably shouldn't do this with your fingers. I don't know if the stuff is toxic. I hope not. It stays on your fingers forever, I'll tell you that.
I'm pretty sure it isn't. I think it's just sticky. I've done a lot of collage myself.
I'm good. Yeah, you'd think I'd look into that, but I'm just like, yeah, it's probably fine. Okay, so once that dries, it'll probably look better. Right now, it looks kind of messy and ugly. But somebody asked about a button. Yesterday, I found this pretty cool little thing in my bag of bits. I have no idea what it is, but this is, I'm sure, something I picked up on the road. So this would be like a perfect center for a flower. And once everything else dries, I might put that in there. Yeah, actually, I think that looks pretty cool. It's about exactly the right size. So once that fabric dries, I'll probably put that in there as a center. It turned out to be like exactly the right size. So the only thing I would do now to finish it is if you have some paint, we're just gonna kind of go around the edges and around some of the, like the beginning part of, or going out towards the center of the flower. And it's gonna make it look really uniform and nice. So I'm just gonna use a burnt umber, any kind of brown, or you know, any kind of, yeah, I would recommend like a darker shade. I definitely wouldn't use like white or anything, but like a ultramarine blue or a brown, or like a sienna or a yellow ochre. Maybe not yellow ochre, maybe that's a little light colored, especially for what I'm using here. So I'm using, here's my palette. It's pretty messy, but I'm just using some burnt umber with lots of water. I don't want to use a ton of paint here. It's more like a wash. So I'm just gonna grab a rag.
Juliette,
Yes.
the middle of the flower, this
Mhm.
little thread that you turned around.
Yeah.
How did you say you soaked it in water?
Yeah, just because it's fabric, it's just, I think it glues more easily if it's got a little bit of weight to it. And it's
Okay.
easier to sort of, it's easier to maneuver. So
Okay.
it's not a big deal. If it works dry, that's okay. Like, just kind of play with it and see what works best depending on what you're using.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. All
Juliette,
right, so, yeah.
Hannah Milena again. Are you
Hi.
going to use acrylics?
Am I using acrylics? Is that what you
Yes.
asked?
Yes.
Yeah. Acrylic water-based paint. Yeah, I do use oils, but usually not until after everything dries. But I don't need to get into that. Yeah, acrylics are perfect for this. And actually, I wouldn't try to do mixed media with oils. I wouldn't know how to do that. That was probably really complicated. All right, so I'm using this watered down burnt umber, and then I'm gonna go around the edge here. And just kind of tone everything. And this will make the whole thing kind of nice and uniform. And then you can either kind of pull it down with a brush or your finger or a rag. And you can keep emphasizing that. I'm going to go into these lighter petals and put a little bit more dark. And also, I should say that having the medium over the petals helps to make the paint over it more uniform, if that makes sense. Because, everything is going to grab the paint in a different way. Paper is going to be a lot more absorbent than the fabric. And if you want, you can sort of delineate some of the petals here. And then we're just going to go around the edges. And we're going to go just a little bit into it, like this. On the dark ones, it probably won't show up as much, but.
Just want to give you a heads up, Juliet. We have about 5.
Almost done? Well, we're just about done.
Yeah.
Can you switch the screen back to Juliet, please?
I don't have control over your screen.
Oh.
You can double click on Juliet and it'll
Thank
go
you.
back to her.
Excellent. Thank you.
So all I'm doing is going over the edges of the petals. And then just kind of, if you go just right over the edges, it'll make the whole thing kind of nice and uniform. And, I'm doing this pretty quickly, but you can keep playing with it. Colored pencils work great. There's all kinds of things you can do to keep going with it. I'll probably glue that thing on there. Lace is awesome, or any sort of like fabric with texture like this I love. It's like this one shirt I've had for years, and I'm down to just tiny bits left that I use in almost every single painting, this fabric. But you can layer it, so you can put, just keep doing the same process and take that and put it over one of these and just create more texture and interest. And that's basically it. Does anybody have any questions?
It's gorgeous. Thank you so much, Juliette.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Very
Thank you.
beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so much.
Join us.
Adios.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Excellent.
Fun.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
Oh, let me see. Can you go back?
Thank you, Juliette. Oh my goodness.
Hey, I just want to say, if you want to, I would love to see if anybody made these with me. I would love to see what they made. Or if you have any questions, reach out, ask me. I'm happy to answer. But I would love to see if you guys made one.
Juliette, do you ever use marker or?
Oh yeah, I have like an entire drawer full of markers. Yeah, I use everything: charcoal, markers, pencils, everything. Yeah.
And then how do you, once it's done, do you treat the surface of your art piece with?
Well, honestly, this like pretty much treats it like while I'm working.
Yeah.
If I'm using a lot of different mediums, which I definitely do sometimes, like when I'm working on a full painting, I start with acrylic and then I finish it with oil. And we have all those mixed media elements. So then I do use a varnish to make everything sort of uniform. Yeah, but for something like this, no, I probably wouldn't. I think this on its own will make the surface great.
And what if you're using the charcoal? What is it, a fixative you use so it doesn't smear?
Yeah, I'll show you what I use. Hold on one second. This is sort of my go-to varnish here.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Great. Does anyone else have any last
I
lingering
have-
questions?
One more question from Ana Milena. Obviously, you're a great artist, and there is a lot to learn from you. Where could we find more information on a workshop or taking some classes, since I am your neighbor?
Yeah, that's so funny. You know what? I don't have any works. Like I have taught a couple times. I just started last year in person. Other than that, I don't have any workshops at the moment, but I am definitely thinking about doing an online course. I'm more than thinking about it. I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to do it. So
Yes, please let us know.
yeah, I will. I want to, and obviously at this time, a lot of people have asked me about it, so I am probably gonna do it. It's just gonna take me a really long time. Yeah. So, but other than that, I don't have anything else. I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody has.
Okay.
So feel free to reach out. But that's all I got.